Hey, my loves. Today I wanted to tell you about my haunted tarot deck, or at least a deck I thought was haunted when I bought it. This is the Ancient Egyptian Tarot. It's by Clive Barrett. You might have spotted it in some of my other videos. I got this deck secondhand, and initially I totally thought it was haunted or cursed. We've all heard the warnings against buying secondhand tarot decks, lest we invite in spooky shenanigans, so I thought I'd share this tale of my weirdest secondhand deck experience. The very first thing that I'll say is that this deck is missing 2 cards, and I still don't know if that's my fault or not. So I bought this deck at an op shop. I think that might be an Australianism, it's a secondhand store. Anyway, I got it at the op shop. I was traveling for a family event, so I was in Queensland, in like a really small rural town. This was in about 2019. I didn't own that many tarot decks at the time, so definitely I wasn't expecting to find one at this random op shop. This is all that it was when it was in the store. It's just the deck. It didn't come with a box or a book. I picked it up and I immediately knew that I wanted it. So I kind of rifled through it, checked that it had the right number of cards, but I didn't really count carefully. I added it to my little pile of stuff that I was going to buy that I was just kind of carrying in my arms, and I kept browsing, and I went to look upstairs. If you know Queensland at all, you know what a Queenslander-style building is, and this shop was in an old Queenslander. So all the stairs were just basically horizontal planks, like no vertical riser in between each stair, just the horizontal steps with really big gaps in between them. Eventually I finished looking around upstairs, and I went to go back downstairs to pay. When I tell you, these cards flew out of my hands and down the stairs. The entire deck just slid right off and fell. And not gently, these things like ricocheted down every step, and the vast majority went under the stairs. The underneath of these stairs was storage, and I don't know how long the storage had been there, but it looked like they'd been storing stuff there for decades. The dust was really thick, and there was like spider webs and all sorts of gross stuff, and I had to go under there to get all these cards. It was so disgusting. I got really covered in like dust and grime. Eventually, like, the poor old volunteers from the op shop started to come over and try and like scoot around and help me find all these cards. And it's not like they were even all visible. Like, I was having to pick up like boxes and bits of cardboard and random old like rusty items and just weird stuff, digging through all this storage, finding all these cards. So at that point, that was the first point that I felt like something was kind of fucking with me. Eventually, I gathered them all up and I went over to the counter to pay. And the lady was like, "Did you check they're all there?" So I stood at the counter and I counted 78. And I handed them over because at that point, basically, like, I'm embarrassed, I'm flustered, I'm sweaty, I'm shaky, and she can tell. And so she counts them as well, just to be sure. And she counts 78. And I pay and I leave. And when I got these things home, I did every type of clearing I could think of. Like, I physically cleaned them, but I also cleansed them 6 ways to Sunday. These things have been smoked, belled, tapped, toned, spiraled, reordered, wiped, cleaned, cleared, physically, metaphysically, every damn way possible. And they still don't act normal. Obviously, it didn't take very long to realize, where are Death and the Hanged Man? I don't know if I lost them when I dropped the deck and had all these cards scatter everywhere under these stairs, or if they just weren't there to begin with. Because you could kind of imagine that those 2 cards are 2 that someone might remove from the deck if they didn't want to see them in their readings. Or they could have been taken out to be used in a spell, or even in artwork, or who knows, could be anything. And it kind of bothers me a little bit because 2 of us counted in the store and they all seemed to be there. So it's like, how could 2 of us count incorrectly? And I tried asking the deck, of course, and the cards that came out basically just amounted to, not telling, but it was funny when you dropped it, hey. So at this point, you can already see how this deck is kind of tricky. But wouldn't you know, I wanted to use it anyway. Again, there are people who say you should never use an incomplete deck. I think it's good to learn the rules, but rules are kind of made to be broken. You just need to be aware that you can invite some unanticipated consequences when you break the rules. So I wanted to start using this deck, and I decided I would start by using it in my daily draws. And it did not play along. I learned really quickly, this deck does not like to read about like daily minutiae. Like, if you do daily draws, you're probably mostly getting sort of an idea of like unexpected rescheduling that happens that day, or a person that's going to be in contact with you, or like advice on what to do in your downtime that afternoon, or, you know, that kind of stuff, daily stuff. And this deck just would not give that type of reading. It's like it won't be unserious. It will only talk about major stuff. I'd be there bleary-eyed with my coffee first thing in the morning, expecting like a weather report. And it's like this guy just comes in like, "You have lived 1,000 lives before. Your petty dramas are meaningless." It's no exaggeration. I'm used to different decks having different tones, but like this is a whole nother level. You get some decks that, are a bit more romantic in tone, some are more practical, some are more kind of magical, and this one basically only interacts with esoteric topics or like deep inquiries. It forbids small talk. I wondered whether maybe I was imagining this or kind of exaggerating it to myself. And so I, of course, then made the silly mistake of trying to read with it casually for a friend. In this fucking deck, they asked about romance, and this deck described a quite traumatic incident in their past that still affects how they form relationships. It's like it really just said, don't ask me questions if you're not ready for the deepest possible answers. Obviously, nothing bad happened in that instance because this is someone that I knew well and, we could have a bit of a conversation. They knew what was going on and they confirmed that interpretation for me and we could discuss about it. But yeah, it definitely got way more serious than we were anticipating. So at that point, what was I to do? For starters, even despite all of this, I still wanted to use this deck. And I want to make that the biggest point here, actually. And that's trusting yourself. Listen to your gut. If I had ever felt like there was something actually wrong about this deck, like anything actually malicious, I would have got rid of it. I've been through a pretty wide gamut of feelings about this thing, but that range has mostly included like confusion and awe, and never anything negative. I knew there was something beneficial here, so I stuck to my guns. I tried a few different types of divination to figure out what was going on with this deck, and all of my other methods indicated nothing sort of untoward. So there was no confirmation of any haunting or possession or hexing or any of that juicy stuff, and that result really resonated for me. So, by all of my own methods, spoiler alert, I think I can safely say this deck is not haunted. But, on the other hand, I have never quite been able to determine what actually is so unusual about this deck. Like what gives the readings the qualities that they have. It seems like the mystery is part of what gives it its power, like within my own personal practice and use. So whatever animates this deck is in part powerful because of that mystery. And it is powerful. From slowly getting to know this deck, one thing I've found is that it gives really good readings on the sort of esoteric and energetic. So any question that's about magic or witchcraft, energy work, past lives, personal spiritual practices, like all of that kind of thing, it's like this deck just lights up. It's like, yeah, gimme. For example, I've done a number of client readings with this deck where the client has asked about sort of energetic blockages. I know not everyone thinks in terms of the chakra model or personal energetic fields and flows, and that's okay. But basically, when I have clients that do come and ask these questions, this deck has managed to track down and pinpoint locations of blockages in some of those systems and recommend like meditations, visualizations, exercises that help to remedy those blockages. And it's actually been really effective for those clients. Like I've been able to provide some of those clients some of their favorite meditations that they continue to use just through readings with this deck. And it's even worked for houses. One client sent me an image of their house, and these cards alerted to leaks in the home in both an energetic and physical sense. So the client thought their home might have been like haunted or there was some possible negative entity or energy hanging around. And what the reading did was give advice of both kinds. So on that practical level, check the plumbing and the roof and all that, because if you have water damage, that can lead to mold and all kinds of nasty stuff. But then also on the metaphysical side, things to do with patching energetic holes around the place, wards, looking at the energy flow of the home, and things that the residents can kind of do on a daily basis to help keep the energetic balance flowing and keep the positive energies in the space. The amount of really good, relevant readings that I've had with these cards now, particularly when clients come with like earnest spiritual or magical or esoteric questions, overwhelms any doubt that I had about this deck. And I've also seen and felt those benefits myself. So hopefully you can see how, in the end, this deck isn't haunted or cursed, it's just mysterious. Relatable. I know that jumping down the stairs, making me get covered in cobwebs, and tricking people into miscounting the cards sounds kind of suspect, but I think that day in the shop was a show of its power. And my first overly serious readings, those first few times, were kind of a demand for respect. So all it was doing was showing me exactly how to work with it and exactly what kind of readings it'd be useful for. It is not a daily driver deck. It's not something to pull out frequently. It can't be asked silly little love questions. But when real help is needed, it's wise beyond description. Now, would all of what I've just said apply equally to a brand new copy of this same deck? Hard to say. I don't know if it's this one particular one that's extra animated because of its own history, the missing cards, all that, or if it's the intention in the artwork that actually is the cause of all of this and it would apply equally to a new deck. I don't know. Would I recommend this deck? Absolutely. But with the kind of bizarre and unique experience I've had of mine, I think my opinion might be a bit biased. So, that's the story of the deck that I thought was haunted. Do you buy tarot cards secondhand? And if a deck jumped out at you like this one did, literally, would you still buy it? I'd love to hear about your secondhand deck opinions in the comments. If you've watched to the end, thank you. If you're not yet, please do subscribe. And if you are, thanks. That's very cool of you. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.